Now, it's my enormous pleasure to introduce Catherine, slightly in a longer way, who is one of our best-loved fiction writers writing today, and she is celebrating 20 years of being a best-selling novelist. So in 1994, this is not going to go on very long, don't worry, but in 1994, her first novel, The Old Girl Network, was in a promotion run by W.H. Smith, would that they were so enthusiastic about books these days, but anyway, called Fresh Talent. And that catapulted the book into the bestseller list, I think it's fair to say, and since then she hasn't looked back. And all 13 novels that she's written have been bestsellers, and they include A Crowded Marriage, A Rural Affair, and now the book that we're here to celebrate, My Husband Next Door. Catherine lives, if you've looked at her website, in what looks like rural bliss, enviable rural bliss, on the Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire border, with her husband, teenage children, and a raft of animals.
Lots of animals.
Of all sorts.
Too
lots
many.
Of animals. And through her book, she's created something that her publishers and her fans know as Alliott Country, which we will come to later. So, My Husband Next Door is a wonderful, sprawling novel about a family. And it's narrated by Ella. She is the woman whose husband does indeed live next door. Well, in a barn. In a converted barn, exactly, where he paints, or doesn't. But their marriage, although he lives there, their marriage hasn't formally ended. And when the novel opens, she realises that she fancies Ludo, the charismatic gardener who is a friend of her sister's and married. More complications come also at the beginning of the novel when her parents, 68-ish year old mother and father, decide to have a trial separation. And the mother, who I would describe as rather
Tricky,
yes. That's kinder than I was going to say. But anyway, comes to live with her because, of course, her sister can't have her. And on top of that, there are the teenage children, there are the animals, there's a difficult sister, and the father, who's discovering a new lease of life with a new woman and all sorts of new activities on hand. So, over the course of the novel, Ella really has to come to terms with all this and has to really decide what her priorities are and what matters in life. And it's a funny, smart, and tremendously entertaining and rather moving novel, which I know you will all enjoy. So, that sort of puts us in the picture. And I'm going to ask Catherine just to read a short passage from the book just to put us in the mood, get you the feel of it, and then I'm going to ask a few questions, or we're going to talk, and then I'm going to throw it open to you guys, and you can ask whatever you want, within reason. So, Catherine.
Well, I've chosen a passage which is an exchange between Ella and her father, and it's, as you said, something to do with their separation. The parents have separated, and she goes to see her father. "This is a surprise, darling," he was saying, already rubbing his hands with delight as he shut the front door behind us. We went through the lofty stone-flagged hall, and he headed straight to the sherry decanter on the far side of the sitting room. "Drink?" "No thanks, Dad, I'll have a coffee," I told him firmly. "Sure," he turned with surprise from the drinks tray on the Pembroke table. "Nothing stronger? Bloody Nuisance, perhaps?" Dad's name for a Bloody Mary on the grounds that it involved him finding Worcester sauce and slicing lemon, etc. "Quite sure," I said primly, perching on the tomb-like sofa. He looked disappointed. "And perhaps you shouldn't either," I scolded. "Mum wouldn't be too thrilled to see you drinking so early, would she?" "Well, she's not here, is she?" he scoffed belligerently, pouring himself an extra large one. Error. I'd thought by introducing Mum early I'd bring him up short, remind him where his duties lay. Historically, he'd have adopted a shamed expression, put his tail between his legs, and got straight in his basket. Not today. His eyes gleamed at me alarmingly from the other side of the room. "Not here to tell me when to get out of bed, whether I can tune the radio to a station I like, or if it's too loud. Not here to tell me not to whistle when I shave. Not here to tell me what time to get my paper, or if I can have a few biscuits, let alone a drink. She can't even give me permission to go and prick out my dahlias in the greenhouse. I can't tell you how liberating it is, Ella. Her coming to stay with you has been the most tremendous success. I can't thank you enough. Given us all some much-needed space." I blinked. "Well, except me." "Oh, quite except you. And you're simply splendid to have suggested it, darling," he said admiringly. "I didn't," I squeaked. "Ginny did." "Oh, did she? Oh, right. Got the wrong end of the stick there." Clutching a veritable bucket of sherry, he came across and sank happily into the armchair my mother forbade him to sit in, the most comfortable, pale pink, squishy one, on which his trumpet's hair oil, she said, made a nasty mark. Was it my imagination, or did he give his head a little rub as he settled into it? This wasn't going quite as I'd envisaged. You mean you don't mind she's gone? Mum, I mean. Good Lord, no, blessed relief, he said with feeling. All she did was nag. Nag, 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 nag. He waggled his head from side to side. And I'm quite sure she needed a holiday. He gulped his drink. Well, it's more than a holiday, Dad, I said sternly. She's moved out. He looked unmoved, shrugged. Whatever. I flinched. My father didn't say things like, whatever. I ploughed on, my face very grave. This is deadly serious, Dad. You're in a real pickle here. There may be no way back. Honestly, between you and me, I think there's a very real chance she might move out forever. Oh, forever's such a nebulous concept, isn't it? He said airily, waving his hand in the air. Especially at our age. Good heavens, one of us could go tomorrow. I frowned, sensing the nub. I narrowed my eyes at him. Is that what this is all about? Sensing mortality around the corner and all that? Getting to a ripe old age and wondering if you've really lived? I mean, you know, emotionally. He widened his eyes at me in surprise. Well, I haven't, have I? I've been here with your mother.
I love him. I think he's my favourite character.
Oh, is he?
Anyway, tell us a little about what the inspiration for the book was, where it came from.
Well, the inspiration was, I hope she won't mind me saying, but a friend who I met at a drinks party, and she was telling me about her sister, who, actually it's a sadder story than this one, in that they were separated, but financially they couldn't afford to live in separate houses, because they had 3 children, and they had schools and all sorts of things going on, so he lived in a caravan at the end of the garden. And she was saying what a nightmare it was, and in fact this chap was an alcoholic, whereas my chap is an alcoholic, but he's my hero, so he's not too much of an alcoholic, if you know what I mean.
No, say what happened, sorry.
And I thought, wow, that is such a good setting, because you've got them all in the same place. You've got the husband, in this case she didn't still love him, and he was a pain, but in my book I thought that would be nice if she still did love him a bit. And
he's not really an alcoholic, he just likes a drink.
He just likes a drink.
Yeah. I know that. Now, so the book ostensibly is about marriage and opens with 2 marriages that are separated, although they're not the only marriages that are in trouble anyway in the book. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit about what you want to say about marriage through the marriages.
Well, I think that it's not that easy necessarily, and that has to be worked at, but I think
maybe where they've gone wrong, where these particular marriages have gone wrong.
They're very different in that Ella and Sebastian's marriage has gone wrong for a very specific reason, which we find out at the end, which is the twist in the book, so I won't give that away. Whereas her parents' marriage has gone wrong basically because she took him for granted for very many years, and he was probably a bit of a doormat, and so he got trodden on. And then people get into a sort of routine of behaving like that, I think, and one person maybe gets more exaggerated just as time goes by, and just really how that can escalate into a sort of situation where one person becomes a bit of an ogre, where in fact probably they're just a bit tricky, as I said, and it becomes exaggerated over time if somebody lets it.
Why did you make her the tricky one? This is the mother.
This is the mother.
Ella's mother.
Well, I think mothers can be a bit tricky, can't they? And I just wanted somebody...
Ella's quite tricky.
Oh, do you think Ella's tricky?
Yes, I do think she's quite
tricky. Oh, do you?
Tricky.
That's interesting. Oh, okay. I think that... why do you think she's tricky?
Well, I think she's quite difficult. I think she's quite difficult with
Ginny,
her sister.
Ginny, I think, is really difficult. She's the sister.
Oh, she's more difficult.
Yeah. She's more sort of stuck up, but I think I just wanted to say how different marriages can be, really, and how, you know, people can get stuck into a sort of rut that they almost don't know they've backed themselves into a corner. But
you also talk about the need to communicate. I mean, the fact that actually
neither of them
a lot of what's gone wrong.
Yes, a lot of what happened with the older generation's marriage was that neither of them said, "I don't like it that you whistle when you shave," or whatever. You know, it was just that sort of unspokenness that can carry on and on and on, and they never sat down and did anything about it. And in that marriage, they do eventually sit down and talk about it. But a lot can go under the carpet, can't it, and sort of get pushed away.
True enough. Also between sisters, because the book's also about sisters.
It's about sisters.
the two sisters, Ginny
Yeah.
and Ella. Do you want to talk a little bit about them and their
Well,
relationship?
yes. I mean, I think that
and how they differ.
the way that they were brought up was that one of them towed the line, which is Ginny, and they were brought up in quite a straight-laced family. And one of them towed the line and did what the mother wanted them to do, and the other one went to art college and probably didn't do what the mother wanted to do. And one married a chap in the army, and the other one married an artist, and that wasn't what the mother saw as happening at all. And then one became very wealthy, and I think money does shed problems on a family. If one child or sibling does stratospherically much better than another one, then you're automatically thrust into a different sort of situation. And Ella's very down on her luck, and Ginny is very up on her luck, but becomes a bit queen bee because of it. And so the sisters, I think, may have been close. I like to think they might have been close when they were young, but as they got older, because their circumstances changed, and because of the money situation and the people they married as well, they got further and further apart. And again, I think they get forced into a position, really, where one of them becoming much grander and the other one resolutely more country and sort of wellies. And perhaps they weren't like that when they started. Well, obviously they weren't, because they grew up in the same tight family unit. And I just think it's amazing how over the years people can part so dramatically, which is like a marriage, I suppose, except,
Yeah.
you know, it's a similar sort of thing.
There's a rather nice bit when the two sisters actually have a bit of a coming together towards the end of the book.
Yeah.
When you write about the past, how they forget,
Yes.
how one forgets the past, and how you
can move on.
drift away.
It's quite hard.
Yeah,
Yes.
but very hard.
Yeah. I think that's right.
And also, it's about parenting.
Yes.
There are those teenagers who kind of loaf around.
Yeah.
Very familiar.
I don't know if you've got any of those. That was easy to write.
But it's also about whether, as a parent, whether you should be hands-off or hands-on.
Yeah.
I thought.
And the sort of parenting that Ella does, actually, I don't do. It probably comes across that maybe I do parent like that, which is very hands-off. I mean, she and Sebastian don't look at the school reports and just sort of let the children get on with it, and they drip around and they smoke all over the house and they don't open the curtains. And my house to some extent is like that, but not to that extreme. You know, I do quite like the curtains open, and I quite like the duvet thrown on the bed, not on the floor. And I like the smoking to go in the garden rather than in the house, you know, but Ella is very laissez-faire, but her children grow up quite well because of it. And I don't know whether that's just pure fiction or whether that would happen, but it's not something I know.
So they're not modelled on any family
No, they're not. I just wanted to see how far I could take that, really.
But it's very convincing.
Oh, thank you.
And another thing I wanted to bring up was friendship, because you have the sisters, but you also have, Ella has a very close friend,
Lottie.
who's absolutely hilarious. She's an acupuncturist, and she
Yes.
keeps dropping the needles. In very...
That was a true story, actually.
Really?
Yeah. A friend of mine started telling me this story, and it was so good. I said, oh, hang on, I've got to actually really listen to this, and I want to meet the girl it happened to. And she said, well, come and have lunch. And I met her great mate, who's an acupuncturist, and she'd just started, and she was nervous, so her hands were shaking and a bit clammy. And, you know, you've got bare bodies sort of on a slab, but you've done your training, but you're not a doctor. And she dropped the needle in, and the woman was on her front, and it was down quite an inappropriate place in her bottom. And she had to get the needle, and so that made for quite fun writing. That was true.
That was great.
I've just sent it to her today, actually.
Oh, she hasn't read it yet?
No.
Funny.
Yeah.
But also, friendship is obviously very important. I mean, how important is
very important.
women's friendship?
Yeah, no, I think it's very important, especially as you get older. I think maybe when you're younger, especially when you're meeting men and going out with boys and things, you sort of think, oh, it's not the most important thing. But I think as you get older, you realise you slot into a way of family life, and your friends are really, really important. And when you start going away for, I don't know, weekends with them or whatever, and for the first time in years, I've done a couple of girls' holidays and things like that, and you realise actually the value of, I've never done it before, never thought I would, but it's great. And, you know, having a book club or that kind of thing, it's really important, I think.
Ludo, who is this kind of charismatic character, but he's not, well, is he the romantic hero? What makes a romantic hero?
Ludo, I'm not sure, is a romantic hero. I think a romantic hero is actually not someone who is obviously slap bang in your face, dead good looking, really obvious, and somebody you think, oh yes, he's the romantic hero. I think he's actually somebody who sneaks up on you rather gently and quietly, and after a certain amount of time you think he's funny, and then you think he's got integrity, or he's honest, or actually he's really nice, or he's really kind. But it's not the kind of the wham-bam of the obviousness that... and Sebastian, I think, maybe is more of the romantic hero.
Yeah.
Because actually he's more like that and a bit deeper.
Yeah.
Ludo is quite obvious.
And artistic.
Yeah. Ludo is the really handsome gardener who you're at your kitchen window and think, oh, he's really good looking. But actually, just because he's digging your turnips in a tight vest and jeans, you shouldn't, really, should you?
I don't know. Well, she wants to, though, doesn't she?
She does, and she has
wants to
that
quite
sort
badly.
of... I don't know if any of you remember Butterflies, whether you're as old as me. Yeah. But that's kind of where I was going with this, with Wendy Craig sort of having this wonderful fantasy fiction about this guy, but she never did it, did she? No. And do you remember it?
I do vaguely, but not well
But
enough.
it was just this wonderful TV thing about Wendy Craig, and she had a perfectly nice family life, but slightly irritating husband, really annoying teenagers, and so she kind of just got out of that. She didn't want to do anything, she didn't want to go away with anybody, by slightly fantasising about this chap who she knew, who turned out to be a really nice guy, who adored her, but she couldn't do anything because she wasn't that type. And I think a lot of people think that there aren't those sort of women still around. I mean, I've had people say, oh, she'd just go to bed with him, and I think that there's actually an awful lot of women who just want that kind of fantasy going on in their head, but they don't really want to do anything about it.
But isn't that as unfaithful as actually having sex with him?
Oh, do you think?
Well, do you? I don't know.
Not as, no.
I mean, it could be construed.
Well, I mean, we can all fantasise about a film star in our heads. I don't.
No,
think.
but I mean, not just. I mean, she takes it
emotionally,
further than just fantasy. I mean, she
definitely,
has an emotional affair with
definitely.
him.
And actually, Lottie says to her, "You're having an affair anyway."
Yeah.
So that is very much one point of view, that she is emotionally having an affair. But I think for a woman that there is a big step between doing everything but getting into bed.
I don't know. Anybody disagree? Agree? What about your favourite character
in that book? Well, I like Ella, but I'm interested to know that you find her tricky.
Oh, I do find her tricky. Yeah. I like Ottiline, the aunt.
Oh, I love Ottiline. Yes, I do.
Ottiline
and I like
is an
Archie,
aunt who lives in another outhouse in the farm.
I do like Ottiline, and she came from totally just out of my head. A lot of the characters come from a little bit of somebody or a melting pot of sort of people I've met, but she was just pure fiction, and I just liked her more and more, and she got so much easier to write as she went along.
She's a sort of sane, calm centre.
Yeah, she's the wise sage, isn't she? Yeah.
She's terrific.
Yeah.
Now, moving on from the novel, as we must because of the time, tell us a little bit about how you started writing altogether.
I started writing. I was working in advertising as a copywriter, and I started getting a bit bored and actually wanting a baby, and I just got married, and I thought, oh, I'll just do this job until I get pregnant, but my mind wasn't really on it. And I started a book under the desk. I just literally had an idea for a first chapter, and I started writing. And when I got about 3 chapters in, I was called into my boss's office, and he said, we think you're doing something else, and you've got the sack, basically. So that was a bit of a conversation when I got home. So I just sort of say to my husband, the bad news is, darling, I've got the sack, but the good news is I'm writing a novel. Oh, my God. Because we literally had sort of nothing at the time. Anyway, then I was pregnant, actually, just coincidentally, and so had the baby, and I'd already written about 20 chapters, just because there didn't seem to be much else to do. And then I finished it when he was born. He was one of those good babies that slept for about 4 hours a day, which never happened to me again, but he did. And when he slept, I wrote, and then I put him down again, he slept, and I wrote. So I finished it, and I put it in a drawer. My husband said, you really ought to do something with that. It was all in notebooks. And my brother got me... handwritten, yeah. I still handwrite.
Do you really?
Yeah.
In what?
Notebooks, big notebooks, A4 notebooks.
Gosh.
But then I put it on the computer. Yeah. So then my brother said, I'll get your computer. which we didn't have, and he worked in the city and they were chucking them out, sort of obsolete ones. So I tapped away and typed it up. And then I think he said, or George said, you really ought to send it off. So I sent it off to a friend of a friend's agent, and she took it. And she took it to 2 publishers, and they took it. And I had to choose between the 2, and it just happened like that, which doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't happen like that anymore. Much harder.
No.
But had you always wanted to write?
No, not really. No.
What,
I mean, I wrote for a living. I was a copywriter, so I wrote ads.
Ah.
So I did English at university, and I wrote.
Oh, so you
wrote
so you read a lot
commercials, and I wrote advertising blurb and slogans and 30-second commercials and that sort of thing. So it's what I did, but I never thought, oh, one day I'll write a book. I just had an idea, which was a girl on a train.
And why romance, not crime or science fiction?
Well, I just wrote about what I knew. I mean, I knew about sort of falling in love and girlfriends and parents and marriages and that sort of thing. I didn't know about science fiction or horror, so I just wrote what came naturally.
So were you chick lit before chick lit was chick lit?
I suppose I must have been, yeah.
And have your novels changed? I mean, presumably your heroines have grown up.
Yeah, they've all got older. I used to write about sort of 20-year-olds in flats with their boyfriends. I now write about divorced women of 55 with their teenagers and their elderly parents. And actually that's become more interesting because it encompasses more age groups. Whereas before, the first book is just about this girl called Polly and her boyfriend problems. I don't think her parents are even mentioned, because when you're that age, you don't think about your parents. I mean, you're concentrated on what your life is, incredibly selfish, and that's how I wrote about it. And then as you get older, you write about, I write about more age groups.
That's what's so great about it, because you've got the 3 generations.
Yes.
And the cousins.
And the cousins,
and so on.
Yeah.
Now, Alliott country, as I said earlier, it's a kind of phrase, I don't know who coined it first.
I didn't coin it. I think the publishers probably coined it.
What is it? Well, how do you see it? Do you know?
I mean, living in it, I sort of, it makes me smile, because I think, well, I'm still, doing the washing up and still chasing the sheep and that sort of thing. It's not quite as idyllic as people probably think it is when they're looking in, but I think it's the rural life. We're not sort of grow your own vegetables or anything like that. I still go to Sainsbury's and do all that, or wherever. But it is about having a nice rural existence, I suppose.
When did you move to the country? Or
we moved about 15 years ago. I mean, I grew up in the country, but we moved about 15 years ago from London.
And haven't you moved to I seem to remember I met you years ago at a sales conference.
Yes,
somewhere,
we decided we had, didn't we?
And you had just moved to a very beautiful...
It's an old farmhouse.
Farmhouse.
Yeah. And it's got land and it's got animals and it's very nice, yeah. But
and did you use it as a model for this? Or?
No, I think I set this in the Cotswolds, but a great mate of mine lives in the Cotswolds and I pretty much used her house. She says her life as well, but it's not true.
And what about when you're writing? Do you have any kind of routine? Do you I don't know, you have to have a cup of coffee before you go riding?
Yeah, but no, my day is basically, I have a cup of tea, which my husband brings me, which is really nice. And then I go downstairs and I let the dogs out.
In bed?
Yeah, I know.
God, still?
A pot, yeah.
Wow.
And then, but he does leave quite early, so it's quite cold by the time I drink it. And then I go downstairs and I feed the animals. And then that in the winter can take about half an hour. In the summer it takes 2 minutes. Just because in the winter there's hay and sort of cracking open the freezing water troughs and things like that. But in the summer it's easy.
You don't have some romantic hero coming and cracking the ice for you?
No, I don't. It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. And then I sit down at my desk. It's really dull. And then I sit there till I get hungry. I go into the kitchen for a couple of coffee breaks. And then the dogs get hungry, so I feed them. And then by about 1:30, I'm quite hungry, so I walk the dogs. And that's the end of my day, really. So I just work in the morning from about 9 o'clock till about 1:30. No. But then in the evening, towards the end of a book, I go in at about 7 as I'm sort of thinking about supper, and I take a gin and tonic and a cigarette, and I think, I'll just have a look. And I find I'm there at 9. And I've got 5 cigarettes in the ashtray and 3 gin and tonics later, and there's no supper, and I haven't. But he doesn't mind, actually. He quite likes that, and he's quite good about that.
So
what's money?
So, yes.
He comes in it.
So his initial reservation is overcome.
It's fine.
Now, in all your novels, I think I'm right in saying, you write in the first person.
Yes, I know.
Why do you do that?
I just find it so much easier. I tried a short story. I don't know if it was Woman at Home, but one of the women's magazines, and I thought, I've been asked to do a short story, I will do it in the third person. And I did do it, but I didn't like it. I didn't feel it. And I feel it when I write it in the first person, even though I'm not necessarily like all my heroines. So people say, oh, is that because you feel you're the heroine? No, because some of them, the one I'm writing at the moment, don't feel I'm that similar to. But it just feels better for me. And years ago, I asked my first editor, I said, is it a problem that I was... She said, no, that's absolutely fine. Whatever you want to do is fine. So I just carried on.
And you don't find it at all limiting that you have to have it from her point of view all the time? I'm
so used to it that I don't. No, I don't find it limiting.
That's
no,
interesting.
No.
And I was going to say, how much do you put in the narrators? But obviously you've answered that, actually, haven't you? Really?
How much do I work?
Of you do you put in your narrators?
Yeah,
Are they you
there
at the
must be a
time?
certain amount. I think the first one was probably more so. And then as you get going, I sort of thought, oh, I can't always be about me, you know. So I might sit down and think, I'm going to do a really feisty one this time, or I'm going to do maybe a bit wetter or something. But actually, a lot of you comes through as well. I mean, all my children say, I can hear you, Mummy.
Oh, really?
I can hear your voice. Yeah.
So do they all read them?
Yeah, they do. Especially the oldest two. And then I think I was saying to you earlier, I have a younger one who doesn't read at all, but she is now reading. It wasn't you, oh, right. She is now reading me, and I'm so thrilled because she doesn't read at all. But she's just gone off on her gap year and taken my
So
book,
she doesn't,
yeah.
when she reads Ludo and Ella, sort of getting to, she doesn't go, oh, God, Mum, how embarrassing. I mean,
They don't. Well, she might. She's still on the early ones. She's on the Old Girl Network. But the other two, they don't seem to. My middle daughter has read the lot. My son's read about 6 or 7.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Mine don't look at mine.
They don't look at them.
No, but I think lots, if not all, your novels are set in, well, obviously in Alliott country, in villages.
The early ones aren't actually. They're
They
London.
aren't.
No, they're very much London. But then I
Sorry.
was living in London at the time. So, oh no, the first one is London, but the second one, you're right, is in the country. But something like The Wedding Day starts in London. Some of them start in London and flip to the country. A Married Man starts in London. I try to do quite a lot in London, and you're going to say, why not other towns? And I quite agree, why not other towns? I suppose because I don't know that many other towns. I've lived in London, I've lived in Tring. So, you know, I write about what I know, and my advice to anyone who writes is write about what you know. So.
What I was going to ask, though, about the country, I mean, that you set them in villages. I mean,
that one, yeah.
In a small town, anyway.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you felt, why you felt that villages made such good settings.
Oh, well, they're so brilliant because you've got everybody there. It's like an Agatha Christie set. You know, you've got somebody who lives across the road, and then you've got the publican, and then you've got the farmer who can just be out of the village, and you've got the snooty lady at the manor. I mean, A Rural Affair was very much like that. It was very much set around a duck pond, almost, with all the houses looking in on each other, which is practically a mile away from me, where I live.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's just an idyllic sort of Midsummer Murder type village, and you can imagine that. But it is just easy as an author to think, oh, he can just walk down the road and then they can meet, and they can be in the village shop, and you know, so that is quite handy.
Yes.
I enjoyed writing that one because, and this is similar. I don't think she's in the village, she's in a farm here, but the village is not far away.
No.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And you say that you enjoyed writing that. I mean, is there one that you haven't enjoyed, or one that you've enjoyed writing
I
in
remember
particular?
struggling over Rosie Meadows, but a lot of people say they liked that, so maybe that worked.
Why did you struggle?
I remember, I think actually it was because I had 3 small children at the time and trying to juggle everything. And actually it was almost easier when they were babies, but when they were sort of, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 or something, I think that's when I was doing Rosie Meadows. I just found the whole thing a bit hair-raising. And I thought, I'm never going to finish this book, but I did. So.
And have you? What about research? Do you do research at all for your novels? Do you
Very, very little, actually, because it all kind of comes out of my surroundings. But the one I did have to research was called One Day in May, and that was the most ambitious I'd ever done. Some of it was set in France, which I know France, so that's not a problem. But for some reason, I set quite a lot in Bosnia. How mad was that? And then I realised I'd never been, I didn't know anything about it, because it was complicated, but she ended up with somebody who had, she ended up in Bosnia in the war, and I had to research it, but the internet is amazing. And I just pretty much did it from the internet, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah. But I found I had tears rolling down my face. I mean, it was so sad. But, you know, researching the Bosnian War, a lot of what you watch on the news goes over your head and you just don't think about it. And actually, when I read about it, I thought, oh, God, this is pretty harrowing. So that was the most ambitious, and I didn't mean it to be. It's just as it went along, it got more so.
Well, I was going to ask, so does that mean that you don't plan ahead? Do you
Don't
write
plan
by the seat
ahead.
of your pants?
Yeah, completely by the seat of my pants, yeah.
So when you start a novel, do you have the characters? Do you have,
these days I have a bit more. When I first started, I used to just sit down and write, completely fearless when you're young, like watching that young 19-year-old tennis player the other day. I mean, you just don't care and you just go. And that's what I did. As I've got older, I think, might just plan a little bit, but I wouldn't get beyond chapter 5, probably, in my head. And I was talking to one of the ladies earlier, she said, do you plan? And I said, the one time I have thought, I'm going to plot it out completely. And I did. And I had notebooks, and I had family trees and bits of paper, and I thought, it's so organised, I'm just going to sit down and write it. I was so bored with it that I didn't write that book at all. And I sat down and wrote one by the seat of my pants, completely different. I didn't write it. No. I was bored with it. I knew them, you know. I didn't want to write it again. I want to write something that I get into as I go along and think what's going to happen next. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. And Catherine will be signing copies of her book, which you have in your goodie bags. And, of course, thank you, Catherine.
Oh, pleasure.
Alliott.
It's been an absolute pleasure.